Hey guys, how's it going? It's Joe Raiti from Raiti's Rides, and if you are a Corvette fan, I have a very, very special car behind me. I have a 1991 Corvette ZR1. Now, I know maybe a lot of you, when you hear ZR1, you may think supercharged, you may think, tons of horsepower, 600, 700 horsepower. This is where it all started. If you don't know anything about the ZR1 history, it all came to a head in 1990. That's when Chevrolet introduced the ZR1 Corvette, and it was revolutionary for its time. We're talking about a 32 valve, 4-cam engine, totally went against the grain of what Corvette owners knew that a Corvette should be. Um, when it first came out, we're looking at 375 horsepower, and then it progressed from there. After the 90s, it kind of went off the radar, disappeared. Then it came back in the year 2008, 2009. That's when they decided to bring the ZR1 name back. They gave it a supercharged engine, over 600 horsepower. And then, if you've been paying attention, 2019, big year, ZR1 is back again, 755 horsepower. But let's go ahead and take a look at this Corvette here. So if you look at this 91 Corvette, what I love about what's called the C4, which is the fourth generation of Corvette, that Corvette generation went from 84 all the way up to 96. What I really like about this, I really like this clamshell hood. As you can see, when the hood is open, it really shows off that whole engine compartment and gives you a lot of access. So that's something that is very unique to the fourth generation. If you look at Corvettes overall, Corvette hoods have always opened up that way, even to this day. So that's a little Corvette trademark. In 1991, they actually went to a revised front nose. The nose is a little bit more rounded, a little bit more aerodynamic compared to the 84 Corvette, which is a little bit more straight cut. Now, if you ever see a 1990 ZR1, that's going to have that older straight cut nose, but with a more rounded back. And I'll get to that in a second when we get to the back of the ZR1. But this was new for 91. Also, they updated the emblem. You know, when we look at Corvettes, one thing that's very consistent is that cross flags emblem. And this is how the emblem was back in 91. They went to a black with the red Chevy bow tie. And there's always that checkered flag because remember, Corvette is America's true sports car. Let's check out underneath the hood. One thing that I love about underneath this hood is how massive this engine is. This is an LT5. So if you're paying attention, that new 2019 ZR1 Corvette, that's also an LT5. Now, I'm not a big fan that they're using the LT5 name for the new ZR1 because that's a totally different engine. That's a pushrod, supercharged engine. This was revolutionary, guys. We're talking about a 4-cam, 32 valve. So what that means is the camshafts are actually on top of the head, not one single cam deep within the block. This thing really revs out more so than any Corvette at its time. Back then, I know this may not sound like a big deal, 375 horsepower. 91, that was huge because a standard Corvette with that 2-port fuel-injected pushrod V8 was putting out about 235 horsepower. So we're talking about 375 horsepower, pretty substantial back then. And this was that first Corvette to really get up in those top speed numbers. When they came out in 1990, people were paying as high as $100,000 for this car. That was the dealer markup for it. But you can see just how massive this engine is. I really love the engine, the way that there's nothing covering it up. There's nothing that plastic all over the place. One thing I want my cameraman Tom to show you is at the front of the hood. If you don't know about Corvettes, they put an emblem all the way up the front here. If he could zoom in for you, it actually shows that this car is made in the USA, right in Bowling Green, Kentucky. All recent generation Corvettes are come from that factory, and that's the only place where they're made, even to this day. And what's really cool is you go to Bowling Green, you can take a tour of the factory, and you could also check out that amazing Corvette museum there. Let's take a look at the inside. Another major place that they changed inside this car, probably Tom wants to swing it around here, is they really revised the inside of the car. They did a whole interior revised. They changed the dash, the speedometer. This car had what was called the valet key. So if you took your ZR1 Corvette and you took it to a valet, you give them you use a key to actually cut the horsepower so that they wouldn't have the use of all 375 horsepower. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, how do you know this is a ZR1 Corvette? Because it looks a lot like your standard Corvette. Let me show you some signs on how you could tell this is a ZR1, because from the front, you can't. First off, if Tom could show you, there's this lower valance piece of bodywork here for aerodynamics. This is ZR1 specific. The standard Corvette would just wrap around nice and clean. So this is one easy way to find out. Another way are the rear wheels. Back then, these were some of the largest rear wheels put on a standard production car. You see this area right here where it's pushed in, that deep dish look? That is there for a purpose. The wheel is actually wider than the standard Corvette wheel at the time. And there's that updated revised logo. This was also a new wheel design for 1991, which was carried through those 90s, 91, 92, 93, and then they went to a star, five-star pattern. Check out on top the third brake light. Now, seeing this third brake light automatically tells you it's a ZR1 because the rear bumper is wider. If it wasn't a ZR1, this third brake light would actually be integrated down in that rear bumper area. Here's where some of the biggest changes you're going to see. The easiest way to tell that this is a ZR1 without looking at that emblem, so let's pretend that emblem didn't exist or it fell off, is right here. On both sides of the license plate are extra pieces of plastic. The reason why is because of that extra width to the rear bumper of a ZR1 Corvette. Also, you could tell this piece right here, this lower section, comes down just a little bit lower. And you can really see how over the exhaust, there's a difference between that and your standard LT1 Corvette of the early 90s. The owner went ahead and upgraded the exhaust, which the exhaust was a quad tip, but they did not have this specific style. And that's something that you're going to find, you know, these cars 20, 30 years old, and owners are going to do things to change it. But like I said, back in 1991, this Corvette was something that really brought it up to the standards of those higher end Porsches and Ferraris. And even though today 375 horsepower, you probably got a minivan that has 375 horsepower. It may not seem like a big deal, but even today's standards, this thing still does 0 to 60 in about 4.4 seconds, over 180 miles an hour. That was revolutionary back then. If this is the kind of stuff that you like to see, leave a comment in that comment section. If you haven't visited my Instagram page, check out Raity's Rides on Instagram. All original content. I want to thank you all for subscribing. If you have not hit that subscribe button, please hit that subscribe button. And like always, guys, I'll see you on the next ride.